Good evening. I want to thank, first of all, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, who is the author and finisher of my faith. I fall short a lot, but I'm grateful for his grace. Thank you to Val and Miguel and Andre for sharing your stories of hope and change. My name is John Schmidt. I'm going to start with September 6th, 2024. Today, I'm 50 years old, and at 3 p.m. this afternoon, for the first time in my life, I became a homeowner. It goes way down from there. I'm going to pull up a seat. There you go. Andre was talking about his mom. My mom was really, really, really important in my life. In 2014, I was sitting in a penitentiary in Smyrna, Delaware, in my 13th year of incarceration. And my mom came to my visit to see me. And at the prison, they have a wall that separates you and the visitors. Yep. But it never separated the love that my mother and I had for each other. But she came in that day and I could tell she was very heavy-hearted. I'm the only child that she has. And she looked at me and she said, I'm really going through a struggle right now. And I said, what's going on, Mom? We talk about everything. She said, I'm really struggling listening to my peers talk about their grandkids. I didn't have any kids. Therefore, she didn't have any grandkids. She said it was really difficult for her to deal with. And I looked at her. I did 20 years in prison. 7 bank robberies, 4 hotel robberies. And I looked at her and I said, out of all the crimes I committed, there were none bigger than robbing you of your motherhood. It's a really difficult thing for me to even think about right now because I just knew she was struggling, but God has given me so much insight in my life, especially in my life of recovery. I've never really gotten into drugs. Alcohol's never been my thing. I come from a family, generations of compulsive gamblers. When I'm in a room of fellow recovering gamblers, it's called Gamblers Anonymous, just like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. Sometimes people can't wrap their mind around that. I introduce myself as John S., a happily retired compulsive gambler. My last bet, January 10th, 2002.
All right.
So over 22 years. And I don't know if any of you know anything about gambling and prison, but there's a lot of gambling in prison. For some people, it's the only thing they like to do to pass time. And so for me, I learned a lot of life lessons along the way. One of the things that I learned about myself, I talk to a lot of kids about this in classrooms, especially when I go into places like Ferris, Newcastle County Detention Center, and the Stevenson House down in Milford.
I've been there.
I talk a lot about understanding your value. And what I learned in my own life, when you don't understand your value, you're oftentimes going to gravitate towards other people that don't understand their value. You're going to get caught up in valueless activities that lead you into valueless environments. And that's what happened in my life. In 1996 was the beginning of a 3-year federal prison stint. It was 1,054 days that I spent incarcerated that time. The reason why that number is always important to me is because that was 1,054 mornings that I woke up and decided to not change my life. And what I've realized is that, and I see it in all the men that I've done time with and people I've seen coming out of prison, if you behave in prison the way that got you to prison, you're coming back to prison. It's a recipe. And I realized early in my bit, early in the time I was serving, because I did the 3 years and I did 17 more because I just didn't learn. I needed to be put away for a little while longer. I still believe that I was overcooked in the oven a little bit, but nevertheless, here we are. So, after the day that I stopped gambling God was all involved in this situation. I was told throughout my whole life, just like many of you may have been told, put the drink down, put the drugs down, get your life right. People from all walks of life talk to me about that. One of the things that my good friend and mentor Hector Garcia says, addiction is the only disease that can be self-diagnosed. It doesn't matter if someone else gets it. I had to get it. It didn't matter, because we're going to stay sick until we do. And so I'm sitting on K-Pod in Gander Hill, right down the street. And I was playing Tonk with this guy named Paul Jameson. And he handed me this piece of paper. It was like a packet. I didn't know what it was. I really didn't even look at it. But he must have looked at it because he gave it to me. And he gave it to me almost like a joke. But they called recreation over. We were all on the block playing. I go back into the cell. It just so happened that on that day, my cellmate was at a visit. So when I came back, I was by myself. It was quiet. The paper that Paul gave me was something that I didn't understand at the time, but it was what's called a South Oaks gambling screen. It's a diagnostic tool that's used in the world of compulsive gambling. Didn't know it at the time. But he gives me this thing, and I always talk about it like, can you imagine two crackheads sitting in the crack house? And the one just takes a blast and looks over at the other one and says, you need to get help. We were both junkie gamblers at the time. And he just handed me this thing. I go into the cell, and it's quiet. And the first time in my life, I start seeing something written down looking back at me. Questions. Have you ever stole something to gamble? Have you ever missed work as a result of gambling? Have you ever thought about committing suicide as a result of your gambling addiction? Have you ever lied as a result? Have you ever whatever? It was like 20 different questions. And all I remember is answering yes to all of them. And I'm just sitting there like, holy, I cannot believe that I've allowed this addiction, this disorder, to take me to this place. So that day I made a decision to stop gambling. Now, I did not know whether that decision would last a day or a week or a month. I wasn't sure. Interestingly, in the prison, they had Gamblers Anonymous meetings. Naturally, I signed up. I wasn't sure what to expect, but there were a lot of people down there who had some stories that were similar to mine in terms of what got them to that level of gambling addiction. So I spent a great deal of my years while I was incarcerated starting workshops for compulsive gambling awareness. I got involved in a lot of positive activities, things that I had never done in the federal prison stint that I did. I got involved in a lot of positive activities. I started understanding my value. Why? Because I started understanding God.
Amen.
And once I started understanding the power of God in my life, I started seeing myself in a whole different light, allowing me to behave in a brand new way that wasn't taking and taking and taking. It was now time to start giving, right? So it was really important to me. So because I didn't understand geography when I was doing my robberies, I also had some in Pennsylvania. So when I left Delaware in 2018, I had to go to Pennsylvania to get parole. Fortunately, by the grace of God, they ran my sentence concurrent with my Delaware sentence. So while I was serving my Delaware time, my Pennsylvania time was running great. But this was another very monumental time in my life. I was at a place called Camp Hill, state prison in Pennsylvania, where they basically, it's their central processing. And I was there for about 3 weeks. And my mom and my aunt came to see me. Now my aunt's a CPA, and it was April. My aunt does not come to see me in April. She goes underground. So when I saw her with my mom, I knew something was going on. So we're sitting down in a visit. My aunt leaves to go over to the vending machine, and my mom turns to me and tells me she has stage 4 lung cancer. The night in that cell was the most difficult one of my entire 20-year sentence. I feel like the one thing, we struggle with anxiety, we struggle with depression, we struggle with other issues, with disorders and with addictions. The one thing in prison that plagued me was uncertainty. I was certain that my mom would be home for me when I got there. I was certain that I was turning my life around. So like Andre mentioned earlier, she'd see her young son thriving in a world where he failed for so many years. And so that was in April of 2018. My mom was getting sicker and sicker. And in October of 2018, I was up for my parole hearing. The way parole works in Pennsylvania, they have what's called an institutional parole officer. He's the person who's physically there with your file to do your parole hearing. In the back of him is a screen with the rest of the parole board there, live. And he tells me to sit down and put my hands like this on my lap. And he says, Mr. Schmidt, you've been in our state system for 6 months. You have a robbery first degree. I'm gonna give you a 1-year hit today. A 1-year hit means I had to do another year before I come back up for parole. He says, I'm gonna give you a 1-year hit today. And just immediately, I'm thinking, I'll never see my mom alive. Just for that split second. And he just lets this thing linger enough, and he says, unless you wow me, you have 10 minutes.
Wow.
And in that 10 minutes, everything poured out of me. Everything poured out of me. Who I used to be, who I want to be, where I'm at, what my resources are, what my hopes and dreams are, everything, all the vulnerabilities, everything just poured out of me. And he looks at me. And he looks back at the screen. And he turns around. And he says, Mr. Schmidt, you wowed us today.
Yeah.
And a few weeks later, I get home, and I'm on home confinement with an ankle bracelet. And I got to see my mother. She was not in good shape at all. I got to spend the entire day with her. This was on New Year's Day, 2019. My mom passed away on the 3rd of January, 2 days later. And that was all very difficult. And this is why recovery is so important. Because recovery teaches us so many things. But the thing we really want it to teach us is self-control.
Amen.
My mother had a celebration of life service. I was in Delaware. The service was at an inn, and I just completely went blank. It's an inn right over the Pennsylvania line on Kennett Pike. Can't think of the name right now. And the home confinement office wouldn't allow me to go. And it was like the final kick in the teeth to my mother. She's gone, and her only child, even though I was home technically, couldn't even go. I had friends of mine who were like, "Hey, just go, cut the bracelet off." Yeah, because that's what my mom would want, I gotta tell you, right? What a way to honor her, right? But it was difficult, and we all deal with challenges of different sorts throughout our lives. But I get home, and my mom already knew that things were really going in the right direction for her son. And so I was hired by the Delaware Council on Gambling Problems. And the messages that I have for kids, there was a young lady earlier, Jaylyn, who was here. She was in 6th and 7th grade at Gunning Bedford. She was one of about the 3,000 kids that I see a year in our high school and middle school system here. And I was so grateful to have this job. I also got my certification as a peer recovery specialist. So there's only 3 of us in the entire state right now who are certified peer recovery specialists with an emphasis on gambling addiction. What I do in schools today is I talk to kids in a general sense about developing a healthy relationship with digital technology. Phones, video games, social media, how it impacts our brains, how it impacts our relationships. I partner with schools and school districts. The most recent one was Newark High School. They have a program they just started this year called Buzz Off. And they're deciding to not have kids have cell phones during the school day. I do a lot of research on the impact of smart cell phone use and neurological development amongst teens. And it's just I'm incredibly grateful for the work I do. And as much as I love working in schools with kids, the work that I love doing the most is really in the detention centers. Really in the detention centers with young kids, because I don't talk to them as much about the incarceration experience. They're going through that themselves. I talk about the abstract things that they just don't understand at that age. Things like what happened with my mom at that visit. I do a little part of my presentation with them. It's called Jailhouse Mathematics.
Hey.
Because these kids, they just chasing paper all the time. And I try to explain to them, I worked for 11 years as a high school instructor in prison. Thank God, I loved the job. I had over 225 men get their high school diploma while I was there. But I made 43 cents an hour. I lost 20 years of my biological life. I heard Miguel mention he was incarcerated for 15 years. I don't know how long Andre was, but I'm sure he did some time. But that's biological time. That is earning years. That is birthdays, Christmases, holidays, experiences, events, weddings, funerals, celebrations. All of these things are gone. And you can't get them back. And so I try to emphasize understanding, not just the time, because time's just a concept in these young kids. Until I bring somebody in who just got done doing 37 years. Started when they were 17, now they're 64, right? So it's important for all of us. And as much as I love talking to kids, and I tell this to kids all the time, as much as I love talking to kids, it's parents. It's parents that need to be better and do better, specifically when it comes to these phones. It's just becoming more and more of a problem for our mental health, for kids and for adults. But it's just, for me, to have the presence of God in my life, to have the presence of recovery in my life. And somebody mentioned this earlier, recovery isn't just not doing something, right? It doesn't mean just not getting high, or not getting drunk, or not gambling, or not shopping, or whatever it is. It's about a whole different quality of life that you not only experience yourself, but you're able to bring that joy and that love and that enthusiasm to other people. And that's really what it's all about. It's all about each one teach one, giving back, right? Giving back what we've taken. I just, about a year and a half ago, and I'm going to end in just a second, about a year and a half ago, myself and about another dozen people started this grassroots movement, and we're an agency now called the Home Team's Chosen Ones. There's 12 of us, and every single one of us did time together. And now we're all home with professional lives, with family lives, with restoration and healing in our own families and communities, and giving back, helping people with reentry, helping people with parole, helping people in communities that are struggling with their own family members being incarcerated, and how to negotiate with that emotionally and financially. So it's been a real wonderful blessing to be on this journey. Am I proud of what I've done and the time that I've done? Absolutely not, but I can tell you right now, I wouldn't be the man I am today without it. And I'm really grateful. And really grateful for not only the Throne Foundation, but this journey, this wonderful place here for worship, and for Zach. He's been a wonderful friend of mine. I've been grateful for his relationship, and always eager and willing to help out any way I can, man. So, true blessing, grateful to be here, and glad I was able to shut it down tonight.